Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our third edition of Travel with Swords during lockdown. This week, we've got one of my favourite destinations that I love to travel to, which is Africa. We're joined by our partners, Knighton Reeve, by David and Catherine. Knighton Reeve, we have a very close relationship with. We've worked with David and the team since Swords Travel started 4 years ago, through African Pride and also through their brand at Knighton Reeve. The reason we work with Knighton Reeve is we love everything that they do, whether it's down to service, whether it's down to knowledge, just the fact that they really take care of the little details, and they're a great supplier to work with a very small, close-knit team that we can rely on, especially during the times like COVID, where we found that they've been extremely helpful. So today they're going to give you all the insights about Africa, where you can go, what you can do. And when I say they are experts, they are true experts when it comes to Africa. Just to let you know as well, as always, we'll be doing a £200 voucher prize draw at the end of the session today. And we've got all our attendees ready in the box to go, and we will draw out one at the end of the session. I'd like to start off first of all by introducing you to David. David is one of the owners of Knighton Reeve, and we'll give you an introduction, tell you a little bit more about the company. So over to you, David.
Mark, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Great to have you all joining us, and thanks for that fulsome introduction, Mark. It's very kind of you, and I think just reciprocating slightly without wanting to make it too much of a love-in, but we as Knighton Reeve choose the agents we work with very carefully as well. And having worked with Mark and the team there, the excellent team there for 4 years, we're very keen to continue this relationship. It works. And there's very satisfied clients that Mark has placed with us over the past few years that have had the most amazing African holidays. So that's enough about that side of it. But us as a business, it says it on the tagline, really, you know, specialists in exceptional travel. And we work very, very closely with our agents in developing the individual tailor-made holidays. Our specialism is in having the knowledge, but it's also having that little je ne sais quoi that really makes any holiday into a special holiday. Mark at the beginning mentioned my colleague Catherine. Catherine, who's on the call, she spent over 20 years of her working life in Africa. She went out for 12 months or so after university and stayed a lot longer, and ended up working in camps, in luxury lodges in South Africa and the Kruger, in various places, even up in East Africa in Kenya. She spent some years in Cape Town. And she knows Africa extremely well, is extremely well travelled, extremely knowledgeable, and is one of the go-tos that Mark and the team have as part of our team, relating to designing and creating all of these holidays. We go the extra mile as well. We like to work with the agents that we work with to give you that extra little bit of special arrangement. So no matter what your requirement is, and believe me, we've had some really interesting requests over the years, that we will cater for it. It's very much more on a sort of individual, tailor-made, concierge type service where we like to operate. I mean, Africa is one of those destinations that does need a bit of planning. It does need a bit of thought, and it does need expertise to pull it together to maximise what there is. So that's enough about us and how we work. The areas that we sort of go to include the Indian Ocean, however. Now, obviously, the Indian Ocean in itself is a wonderful destination, but it is a very, very popular combination with Southern and Eastern Africa. So whereas we do the continent of Africa, we also do the Indian Ocean that links in with that as well. So just bear that in mind when Mark and the guys there are planning your itineraries. Okay, I think I love that picture because, you know, it's a leopard cub on a branch. Wonderful. But these sort of pictures are very indicative of some of the ways that Africa has that exceptional pull and that exceptional way of getting under your skin. And having been in the travel business all my working life, and for Africa directly for the past dozen or so years, once you go to Africa once, you will go again. It's not a one visit destination. It is a place that people gravitate to. Some of the clients that we deal with and some of our agents send people there every year. Sometimes they may go once every 3 or 4 years, whatever it may be, but it is never a one-time destination. There are so many variations and ways that you can look at creating your own perfect holiday. the point here about luxury is a very wide used word, and to be honest, we don't like using it because luxury is very different and different people want different things, and it says it there. It means different things to different people. To me, luxury is being in a tented camp with a drop shower next to a waterhole in the middle of the African bush. But also the following day, it might be in a 5-star deluxe hotel in Cape Town having a luxurious 3 feet deep bath. So the word luxury is something that is individualized, and we very much understand and work on that. So the destinations we feature, you can see on the right hand side. The ones with the orange ticks are, as of what, 3:10 on a Wednesday afternoon, they are the ones from which at the moment the government in their wisdom has decreed that there is no quarantine required should you visit one of those countries. Now that is today. I think, as we all know by now, every Thursday they announce countries that have or have not come on or off the corridor list. In fact, it was only last Thursday that Namibia and Rwanda were taken off the corridor list, put on the corridor list, forgive me. So, you know, over the next few weeks, we are very much hoping that the numbers of countries that are available to us, I'm just logging into my other computer, sorry, because I've got my prompt sheet here. The other countries that are on the list will hopefully sooner rather than later come more and more back into the frame. But they're the areas we feature, they're the countries we do. And as I say, they are ones that are currently available for no quarantine. However, there's talk, I think, as we heard today, that they're very much looking at a 5-day quarantine with a hopefully negative test on the 5th day. So even the quarantine from 14 days is hopefully going to come down very, very soon, which is great news. So watch this space. The area of Africa we feature, really, I think it's important to put it in perspective. The whole of the continent Africa is shown on that little insert there, and it is huge, as many of you will know. The area we feature is the slightly darker brown colour, which is generically often called sub-Saharan Africa, or Safari Africa, as we would perhaps know it. And it starts in the north in Kenya, coming down through Tanzania and Rwanda, down through Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia and Botswana, into South Africa itself. Mozambique is there, and obviously just off the map you have Mauritius and the Seychelles. So that's the area of Africa that we feature, that we are expert in. And I think it's a bit of perspective here that's needed as well, because I think sometimes times and distances people may not be aware of or can misunderstand. So if you think that obviously Africa's below us, as we're coming into our winter now, they are very much coming into their summer. I was just watching a clip earlier today for about 10 minutes live from the Kruger, and it was 40 degrees in the Kruger today. And the Kruger is obviously a national park just at the top end of South Africa there. Whereas if you come much further north across that Tanzania-Kenya belt, roughly through Kilimanjaro, give or take, that's where the equator is. So you get the very tropical weather in the equator, you get more subtropical coming down through Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Botswana and Namibia, and then further down to South Africa, you get to the very bottom of South Africa, where you see Cape Town and the Garden Route, for example. The next stop from there is Antarctica. So, you know, they do have a distinct cooler season, which is in our summer. So that's sort of May, June, July, August time. But cool is relative. It's not like we get here, but, you know, they do, and they have, and they will get snow on the odd times on Table Mountain, which the locals love, of course, because they rarely see it. You do get snow in the mountains of other parts of South Africa as well, because they are up to 7, 8, 9, 10,000 feet high. So there is a complete contrast in climate. And we do often get asked, actually, when is the best time to go? Well, I suppose the easy answer is there's never a bad time to go. It just depends what you want and what suits with you, both in terms of when you're able to go, what your budget is and what your requirements are, whether it's school holidays or not. So somewhere in Africa, there's always something for everybody. But as a high level, there are a couple of distinct weather patterns. Just to give you a literally high level on, and I'm not going to necessarily expect you to remember this, but going back to Tanzania and Kenya, where I said earlier they have the equator, the main rainy season there is roughly from April into May, late March, April into May. And then they have another smaller rainy season about now, actually, November into December. In the bit where Zambia, Zimbabwe and Botswana are, they generally have their wet season sort of December into January time. And then in the southern part of South Africa, because it's such a big country, and on the one side they have the Atlantic Ocean, on the other side they have the Indian Ocean. There's two sort of distinct little weather patterns there. But in the main, anywhere in Africa is good to go at any time of year. It's just a case of talking to Mark and the team. They'll talk to us and we can work that out for you. The area at the bottom, which has that dotted circle, approximately, is roughly where the malaria region is free. It's free of malaria. So anything north of there is malarial. So if you look, for example, to the just slightly top right of Johannesburg, outside the circle, you'll see the Kruger National Park. That is a malarial region. It's low risk, I'll grant you, and it's a higher risk at certain times of year, but that's malarial. The Botswana, Okavango Delta in the north of Botswana is malarial, as is the northern part of Namibia. But south of that, so Cape Town, the Eastern Cape, Madikwe, all those places you can see there are malaria free. Also then, if you go north, that is all malarial, right up to East Africa. So just to be aware of that. But again, we give all that information out and we work with you to try and understand just what is best for you in that environment. And I'm sure many of you will have travelled before to different places, whether it be Latin America or the Middle East, Far East, where, you know, there's malaria all year round as well. So, OK, moving on. The elephant in the room. Just a word about this photo, actually. This is in a place called Mafui, which is a lodge in South Luangwa in Zambia. And this is a genuine photograph. Every year, the wild mango trees, which are in the grounds of this property, they fruit now, really, October into late December. And the elephants over the years, long before this lodge was built, know there are wild mango trees. And so they literally walk through the open area of the reception. Don't worry, it just doesn't happen without warning. There's people all around knowing if it's going to happen. They look out for the elephants every day, and it doesn't happen every day. But I think that's rather an unusual check-in site that you might see, but it's all very well done. They're not tame, these beasts, at all. They are wild, and they disappear just as soon as they've arrived. But I just think that's one of the more unusual reception places that you would come across. But anyway, just a little bit about COVID. Let's talk about it now. I touched on it earlier about the countries. Tests are needed before arrival, which is quite normal now. There's a test and trace system. In fact, some of the countries, such for example as Rwanda, they've got one of the best track and test and trace systems in the world. They put a huge amount of money in it, and because they had some history with, for example, when HIV was there in numbers, they have a very good, sophisticated track and trace and medical facility. The protocols that Africa have put into place are immense. But also when you think about it, and those of you perhaps who've been on safari will understand this, certainly when you go to some of the lodges, they almost by default operate a social distancing mechanism anyway. It's low in numbers, it's private dining often most of the time. You don't mix with a lot of people when you're on these safaris and when you're in these areas. So all they've done, they've just upped it from a level that was already very high. The training they've invested in the staff and the health and safety is huge. South Africa was granted, as was Kenya, as was various other countries, the World Travel and Tourism Council safe travel protocol. So the countries have been granted that they are safe to travel to. And the numbers of cases of COVID in Africa is infinitely less than it is in the developed world, including the UK. So it's one of the best places to go to currently. However, we have a very unusual Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office who are saying at the moment that other than Namibia and Rwanda, you shouldn't really be going to anywhere in Africa, which is a little unfair because it is safer than here. But as I said earlier, we're hoping that some of those places will come off the list very soon. And again, why this is, there's space, there's privacy. There is a place where you can really re-establish yourself. And I think anybody that's gone through this year are going to be looking for holidays where you can really enjoy yourself, your family and your partner, whatever it may be, and just rejuvenate yourself and get back into the experience of it. I think this word multi-generational, which again is quite an overused word, by that it generally means grandparents, their children and their children. So 3 generations, grandparents to grandchildren. Africa for a number of years now has been an amazing location, an amazing destination for people who want to do that. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we've booked many different families who perhaps wanted to take a private villa for their family. And they could do that with 8, 9, 10, 12 people, or they have a couple of suites in a hotel or whatever it might be. So anything that's multi-generational, again, Africa is massively geared up for and works really, really well. So, from our perspective, as soon as that green light comes from the FCDO, Africa is one of those destinations that really will tick all those boxes. So obviously we're not playing down COVID. We know our responsibilities as a tour operator, and we take those very seriously. You will have responsibilities to yourselves and your families, and then Mark, as our travel agent, will do as well. But together we can work things out and make sure it works out to everybody's benefit. So, so if it is on the agenda, or should be on the agenda, then please come and talk. We have a line here saying a visit to Africa is not just a holiday, it's an experience like any other. And again, touching on what I said earlier about it being a massively repeat destination, it is one of those places that does get under your skin a little bit. There was a study done a few years ago by some anthropologists where they believed it was because that inherently all of us originated in Africa. So following that theory that life, as it were, or human life, began in the Eastern Africa Rift Valley, then once you get to Africa, you're almost got a feeling, and it's almost like a subconscious feeling of almost coming home. It sounds a bit twee, but you do get that. And so because of that, the need for people to go and travel to Africa and get their fix and repeat visit is really, really high. Okay, I think this is a really interesting one because it shows two things. The first thing you see there is the elephant, the huge elephant. The second thing you see is that beautiful sort of pale pastel sky in the background. But if you look very closely, just in front of the elephant's tusk, you'll see a sort of a roof. It's only small, you should be able to see it though. And that is one of the camps and the lodges that are in one of those game areas. And that's also what happens hugely in Africa, that they build their lodges and their camps in a very sort of environmental and very sympathetic way with the local people, the local environment, and the local habitat. So they don't just plonk a 4-story building and say, right, we've now got a hotel in the middle of the bush, let's sell the rooms. It isn't like that. The development is very well controlled and very sympathetic. And you will have the most amazing experience in some of these lodges and game areas where you will literally be sat on your porch, sat in your pool, or sat having dinner, and there'll be elephants or antelope or lions or whatever within, 30, 40, 50 meters of you walking through. And again, some people can be a little bit apprehensive about that, and particularly when there are smaller children. Many places don't have fences, and that is also part of the experience. But again, if there are smaller children, some camps make sure it is fenced off so that then the children are going to be well looked after. So again, depending on the age makeup of your party and your personal preference, we always need to know what it is, and then we can work out the best lodge or lodges for you. Similarly, it is hugely important, and we get this a lot where people say, I want to go on safari, and that's great. They've never been before. But we always try and get through our travel agents, say, look, well, what do they want to see? And it may be that, one of the party is massively into giraffes or elephant or lion or whatever it might be. Because on any safari, we can never 100% guarantee what you're going to see, but we can have more of an idea where the best places are to see the best things. So I say, if it is a giraffe that you're most keen to see, there are places where we know you're going to have much more chance of doing so than others. So in thinking about where you want to go, it's also what you want to see and when you want to see it. And all these bits make up a jigsaw that we can then work to try and create the best individual itinerary for you. But the safari experience does vary a little bit in that, depending on where you are, if you're in East Africa, that Kenya-Tanzania belt, which is the Masai Mara in Kenya and the iconic Serengeti and the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania, quite a lot of the time you're traveling between those places. So you could be on the road during the day a little bit and moving from lodge to lodge or location to location. Once you're in other places, such as, for example, Botswana or Zimbabwe or South Africa, most of the game drives tend to operate completely at dawn and dusk, and then the remainder of your day is your own. So on a normal day, you will get up just about sunrise, have a quick coffee and get out on the vehicle for, 3.5 hours or so, depending on when sunrise is, but then maybe getting back to the lodge 9:30, then having breakfast, or in many cases having breakfast maybe out in the bush that they've arranged for you. And then the rest of the day is at leisure. You know, there's often spas and wellness facilities. They will often do bushwalks if you're interested. There's libraries, there's all sorts of things you can do. And then come mid-afternoon, 3:30 or so, 4 o'clock, afternoon tea, and then the evening game drive goes out, going into dusk. And one of the most magical things there, and those that have been there will know, but one of the most magical things is then having a sundowner as the sun is literally setting, with a G&T or a wine or whatever your drink is of choice, with a few nibbles, and watching and listening to Africa as it changes from daytime into nighttime. It's a magical, magical time, and the sundowner is iconic. It's one of my favourite things to do. So the safari experience can vary, the safari vehicles can vary, but all round their main aim is to give you the best safari experience that you can have. But it isn't just about safarying. You know, you ask 100 people what's Africa famous for, wildlife and safaris be the one. But there are many other things. You know, we do lots of honeymoons and wedding anniversary celebrations, or just couples who want to have a romantic time away. And the lodges and the hotels that we deal with are excellent. They're brilliant at putting together something like that private dinner there in that stunning setting, or as I say, out in the bush, or under a mapani tree, just listening to the wildlife. Whatever you want to do, it can be arranged, and that's something again where our concierge speciality comes into play. That picture there is in a place called Swalu, which is sort of in the northern western part of South Africa, roughly going up to Namibia, Botswana. And it's actually a lodge and a game area that's owned by the Oppenheimer family. And they have this wonderful magical facility, an amazingly huge reserve with some of the more unusual wildlife there as well. You know, there, for example, they have brown hyena and aardvark and various other unusual, and pangolin, various unusual things. So again, if you're desirous to see something different, there are places we know that can do that. Family friendly is important. I touched on that before. Some lodges will, and some areas will take children only under a certain age or over a certain age. So again, that's important. The most lodges where they take children, they have amazing staff who look after the children as well, because to be fair, you know, a 7-year-old child may not necessarily want to go on a 3.5-hour early morning game drive. So it may be that the parents might want to go, and then there's a babysitter sat with the child until the child awakes, and they make them breakfast, and they take them out on a little bumble around the lodge and all sorts of little things, and make their own breakfast, or do some painting, or, as most kids like, take them in an area where they can go and see some animal bones and animal poo, because let's be honest, that's what kids are very often interested in. But the lodges are very good at working with families and working with children. The left-hand photo for road trips. Certainly in South Africa and Namibia, traveling on the road is a very, very popular way of doing it, mainly because of the scenery and the amazing experiences. They both drive on our side of the road, which is the left-hand side of the road. Very safe. The directions that are given to you from ourselves are very detailed, very well organised, very well done. I mean, this is the pass coming out of George into Oudtshoorn, which is up in the garden route area in the Utenika Pass. So it's very scenic, and South Africa has a plethora of amazing scenery. But if you don't want to drive yourself, which is fine, we can have private driver guides. There are small group tours. There's a whole range of way of doing it. If time is tight, you can fly between most places as well. But road trips is a very popular way of seeing certainly South Africa and Namibia. And just a word on food and drink. It always never ceases to amaze me, and no matter how many times I go on safari, even in the most remote location, the food you will have is amazing. You can go to some amazingly top lodges, which are 5-star deluxe, and the food is as good as you will have anywhere. But just as good is having that bush dinner where they've made a 3-course dinner for you out in the bush, surrounded by lanterns and maybe elephants trumpeting, you know, mile away. It's just an amazing experience. And certainly in South Africa, that the Cape area, the Cape Town and Franschhoek and the Winelands, it's renowned as the jewel in the crown for food in the whole of Africa. So if you're a foodie and you like some restaurants, there's some amazing places there. And the prices you will pay there for the equivalent here are incredible value. The Rand exchange rate at the moment is such good value. It's really worth sort of taking advantage of. So, you know, a good meal, a really good meal with wine will cost you half what it will cost you in the UK equivalent. So eat, drink and be merry. There is astounding scenery in most of Africa. This is Namibia. It's called a place called Deadpan Vlei, VLEI. A vlei is sort of like a lake or a sort of a water area which sometimes floods. When there's a lot of rain, it will flood, but then it evaporates and you get that sort of dry, crusty mud and salt. But these trees have died because of the salt and because of the lack of water. And that's a sort of a sunset or sunrise. It's very difficult to tell. An amazing photo of Namibia, which has a plethora of sights and scenery that you would love to take on board. Stunning, stunning. It isn't all about, as I say, safaring either. You know, we have this adventure. Now, this could be soft adventure. It could be going out whale watching, for example, between roughly July and December, down in the very bottom part of South Africa, not far from Cape Town. The Sardine Run, for example, which is this very famous run up the east coast of South Africa alongside KwaZulu-Natal. That happens in, I think my memory's gone blank, I think it's June, July time, where they get sardines, billions of sardines and all the associated wildlife with whales, dolphins, birds and all sorts of things. But what we're also very proud of, also going back to that, you know, there's walking trips, for example. You know, we did a couple actually just before the lockdown who were very keen on walking, and we arranged a walking holiday for them up in some of the mountains with a guide. There's horticulture, there's photography, as I said before, there's wine, there's gourmet events. So any sort of interest you have, we can work on something that way. We're also immensely proud of the community work we get involved with down there, and there's some amazing facilities that we work with in all of the areas. In fact, most lodges and most of the hotels that we use have a link with a community project of some sort. We last year booked a couple of ladies and their husbands who owned a dance school in not far from you guys, actually. It was Surrey way. And they went out and visited, we arranged for them to visit a dance school that is run by people for some of the township kids in Cape Town. And they took out loads of ballet leotards and ballet pumps and things. And they did a morning's class with the ballet school there, the dance school there. So again, all sorts of community activities that we love giving back, and many, many clients that travel with us also love giving back as well. So just a little bit on South Africa now. I'm not going to go into too much detail on each country. I'm very aware that I've already spoken for quite a bit of time, half an hour or so. But look, South Africa is probably the main destination in terms of numbers and people who go. Roughly about 60% of all visitors to sub-Saharan Africa have South Africa as their main destination. This is a picture of Blyde River Canyon, which is up in the top right-hand corner of South Africa, not that far from the Kruger National Park. And this mountain range is the mountain range that goes all the way up through Africa, through the Kenyan, Tanzania, that leads to the Great Rift Valley. It's that mountain range that comes all the way down. Stunning, beautiful scenery all down there. And a rather more unusual view of Cape Town. Most views of Cape Town have a view of Table Mountain. Well, this is taken from Table Mountain, looking down over the city itself. And Mark was... we were very fortunate to have Mark with us, and Mark had a wonderful trip with us in December, about nearly 12 months ago, actually, Mark, wasn't it, actually, where we went to Cape Town, and a few of us climbed up the mountain to the left here, which is called Lion's Head, and we climbed all the way up there, and it was a bit strenuous, but we managed. And then the smaller hill to the right is Signal Hill, which in the old days is where they had the cannon placed, so that when any ships came into the bay, the cannon went off and everybody in the town knew that there was supplies coming or there were traders coming. And hopefully you can see it, but between those two little mountains out in the ocean in the distance, that's Robben Island there. That's where obviously Mr. Mandela was imprisoned. So that's a view back down to Cape Town, looking down over the beautiful scenic area from in the sort of evening time from Table Mountain. South Africa and Cape Town is its main destination, and it's rare that we do a trip without a Cape Town visit. Most people go there for 4 or 5 days, and the range and the places of accommodation you can stay range from the very waterfront, which is sort of like a restaurant, shops, sort of tourist area. There's around the mountain where you can stay in the winelands. There's in the downtown area. There's over to the left of Lion's Head, just off the picture, down in Camps Bay and Clifton and around there. There are so many areas within Cape Town that are well worth a visit, and we often find that if people are going back the second time, they'll often go to a different place to stay within the city just to take in the variety. And out to the right, you can't sort of see it, but off the map, out to the right is heading out towards the winelands to the east, about an hour and a half's drive away. And here are the winelands. There we go. It's as though I knew what was coming next, isn't it? Again, winelands, stunning scenery. The three main towns being Franschhoek, Paarl and Stellenbosch, and they form a sort of triangle. And I think I'm right in saying there are nearly 200 wineries within that region that are open to the public, that you can go and see and visit and wine taste and lunch and walk around. Quite a number of them are on the famous wine tram. I don't know whether you've heard of this, but out of Franschhoek itself, there's a wine tram that does a very circular routes around various of the wineries. So you buy a ticket and it will perhaps buy you 5 wine tastings in a day. You can buy wine, bring it back on the bus. They take it back to the office for you that you can pick up at the end of the trip. And these things start at 10 a.m. in the morning. So if your idea of fun is wine tasting at 10:30 a.m., probably for the rest of the day, then the wine tram is right up your street. But aside of that, we're also able to do individual private wine tours as well, with a little bit more sort of privacy, a little bit more sophistication, where you have a driver guide and he or she will take you down some of the more exclusive wineries and places for lunch and really buy into the history and what's going on in that area. So again, a big hit on most people's agenda. The garden route I touched on before. This picture is from a place called Knysna Heads, and Knysna is sort of in the heart of the garden route. It's where many people stay, or at least stop off for at least a night or two. It is a good place to base yourself if you want to have 2 or 3 days in that region. And the garden route is probably one of the most misnamed routes in the world, because there isn't a garden to be seen, really. It's more a case of ever-changing scenery. It generically is from Cape Town right over to Port Elizabeth, which is about 600 miles away. But in reality, it's for the middle portion of it. It's about a couple of 100 miles. And it's a very lovely drive, a very easy drive. And it's ever-changing scenery all the way through. But what it does lead through is to, and we've mentioned it here, an Eastern Cape safari. At the end of the garden route, not far from Port Elizabeth, there are, 7, 8 or so, and more actually, private game reserves. And these have some most amazing experiences with wildlife. Because they are in South Africa, and this also applies to the Kruger, actually. The Kruger's as big as Wales, but every one of these is fenced. And the reason it's fenced is South Africa is such a populated country. So once you go into the reserve, then you're in the reserve proper, and really you could be anywhere. You don't get that feeling at all. But the Eastern Cape safaris are a beautiful way to end a Cape Town garden route holiday. And again, the wildlife there is excellent. And a 2-3 night stop in one of those places is wonderful. Again, they have private villas, they have exclusive COVID protocols in place. Again, they're doing it just well as they would. This is an image of an old battle-scarred lion, as you can see, a stunning image. And, we've used this to introduce the Kruger National Park. I have touched on that once or twice, but the Kruger is a mix, really. As I said, it is as big as Wales. On one side is Mozambique, and the rest of it is in South Africa. And it almost it goes as far north almost as Zimbabwe. It's huge, but once you're in there are various different areas, and there are a couple of ways to do it. The Kruger National Park proper is just that. It is a national park. I was there with my wife 2 years ago, this very month actually, and we drove ourselves with our own vehicle into the Kruger, and we spent about 7 days in the Kruger visiting some of the lodges in the south, in the middle, and the very top, and we drove ourselves all the way. What we also then did is we spent a bit of time in some private areas as well. Now, in the main national park, the public are allowed and people can drive like we were, but there are some game areas, for example, called the Sabi Sand, which you may have heard of, or Timbavati, and they are areas that you get the private game reserves, and the only vehicles that are allowed in there are the ones that are operated by the lodges there. So it is a much more personal, private experience once you're in these private game areas. And in fact, again, going back to Mark's trip last December, here he is. He joined us on this trip, and we did Cape Town and then went up to Singita Sweni, I believe it was, which is a beautifully amazing place. And again, I know, Mark, you had a wonderful time there. So I don't know whether you want to say anything, do you, or are you just going to let the pictures speak for themselves?
Yes, I can say something for sure. Do you know what? It's bringing back so many memories already, just looking at it. It was such an amazing trip. I mean, obviously, I know that you were talking about the food before, and it made me think of Cape Town when we went to the Codfather on the first night.
Yeah.
Such an amazing fish restaurant, and it's all these little places that you go to with Knighton Reeve that we've now been able to recommend to our clients as well, and it really does make a difference. But yeah, the whole trip, the Winelands, Cape Town, and obviously Singita was a really, really special moment for us. And we were there for 3 nights, and we got towards the last day and we were like, are we going to get to see a pack of lions or not? And it was really touch and go, and we did manage to get to on the day before the last day. So it was brilliant. I mean, I don't think there's any other experience like it. And yeah, you guys were absolutely tip top.
Great, thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure to have you. I think that's a very good point you made at the end there, and I did touch on it earlier, that even though in the Sabi Sand, or sorry, in Singita, which is full of wildlife, Singita Sweni, there's no guarantee you're going to see things. You know, if the animals aren't wanting to be seen or they aren't there, they're not there. So there's always a chance that that big tick list, you know, may not be fulfilled. That isn't a disappointment. That is an opportunity for a further visit. And if you're seeing lions in one part of Africa, you then want to see them somewhere else because there are different variations. So all that wildlife experience comes to the fore. I'm also aware as well that I believe, was it two or so years ago, Stuart went over and spent some time in Africa as well. I think he did. Was it Zambia or Zimbabwe or Botswana? I think so.
Yes.
I know he had a good experience, didn't he? So
he did Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana as well.
Yeah, great. So between the two of them and between the associates that they have, there's some really great knowledge and experience that they can bring to the table for you, which then working with us goes back again to creating your perfect itinerary. So happy memories there, Mark. Now then, hold on a second. There we go. The picture on the left, if you look at the bottom left, it says Madikwe. I just wanted to touch on this again because you might remember from one of my early slides where I showed a map of Africa and I said Madikwe is a malaria-free region. Well, the Kruger is malarial. Madikwe, which is west of Kruger, is malaria-free, but it still has all the game. And because of that, this has become really quite popular again with maybe families or people who don't want to take the malaria tablets. Amazing game there, amazing lodges, amazing wildlife. It's about an hour's flight north of Johannesburg, or about a 4-hour drive. I've been there a couple of times and never been disappointed. It's a wonderful place. KwaZulu-Natal. For many years, going back to distant times, it was called Natal by the settlers, Natal being Christmas because it was discovered or taken over at that time. Kwa is the home of, and Zulu are the Zulu people. So it's the home of the Zulu and Natal. Fascinating place. Very, very popular, and often for maybe second time or third time visitors, but there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't go for the first time visitor. Amazing scenery. It's got the battlefields of old, which are the Zulu battlefields. So Rorke's Drift in the film Zulu, which we've all probably know of or seen, I would imagine. That was all around that area. Again, some stunning wildlife reserves, some stunning game areas, some beautiful accommodation, and a very different sort of African experience. Much more temperate in its climate, much more subtropical because it's a little further north. But again, very much on people's agenda. Fabulous fly drive itinerary, or again on maybe a private guided tour. Very well easily combined with other parts of Africa as well. So these things aren't in isolation. You know, if you want to do Madikwe and the Kruger, you can do it. If you want to combine KwaZulu-Natal and Cape Town, absolutely fine. If you want to combine, you know, Cape Town and Botswana, what we're coming on to in a minute, that's great. You know, anything can be done. It's just subject to logistics and time, and at the end of the day, budget as well. You know, that comes into play. Anyway, moving on to Botswana, which is north of South Africa. It says it there, it's untamed Africa at its best. This probably has one of the most wild of wild African places. This is, I think many people will be aware of the Okavango Delta in Botswana, which floods generally from mid-April or so, and floods right through to about maybe July into August. It starts really going down. And then when you're there now, this time of year, there's always water there, but the floods have subsided. So Botswana is famous for its exclusivity, its lodges, its camps, and its wildlife. I was talking about fences earlier in South Africa. Nothing is fenced in Botswana. There may be the odd camp that might be fenced if they want to take children, but in the main, Botswana is open. And the experience of wildlife there is really out of this world. And what it is then it's a gateway in Botswana to the area just to the right of it, which is well, we called it Victoria Falls, but that's the border of Zimbabwe and Zambia. And looking at that picture, that is taken from the Zambian side, looking to the west. So that is sunset there. And just behind us is Zimbabwe. 2/3 of the falls are in Zambia and 1/3 is in Zimbabwe. That picture is neither full flow of the water or the lowest flow of the water. It's somewhere in between. If you go there, for example, in October, probably, the chances of seeing that water there in front of you is very slim, but there will be water over to the left. If you went there in May, when the floods have come, in the same floods that do the Okavango Delta, all of that wall of rock will be covered in water, and there'll be steam and spray all over the place, and you will get drenched if you were stood where you were stood there. Spectacular in the extreme. Again, if you're going once, probably seeing it at full flow between April, May, June, July is best. But if you can go again and see it also then in September, October, early November, when there's less water, both are spectacular. But Victoria Falls is a real gateway then into Zimbabwe and Zambia, which, again, Zimbabwe has a history, it has a reputation, but we put there Zimbabwe is back. When Mugabe was involved, Zimbabwe still had the most amazing wildlife and everything else, but the infrastructure was getting a little bit sort of old and worn and torn, and there was corruption all over the place. But it still retained the ethos of what Zimbabwe was. You talk to any old Africa hand, and nearly all of them will say Zimbabwe, or in the old days, Rhodesia, was the place that was the best in Africa, and it still retains that. That picture is actually taken from Mana Pools, which is in Zimbabwe. So we're in Zimbabwe taking that photo, but behind the elephant and onto those mountains, that is actually Zambia. So the Zambezi River comes and splits the two countries. But there is some of that wildlife proper. Here is where safarying sort of started in Zambia. You get the term safari is a Swahili word for journey, and that's where it really started all those years ago. And Zimbabwe and Zambia have some attractions that are unique to other parts of Africa. A little bit more for the perhaps a little more experienced traveller who maybe want to see a bit more of Africa. But again, combining Victoria Falls or Cape Town with, for example, a safari in one of these areas is absolutely doable, and we wouldn't discourage anybody from doing it. Just something else I'll mention here as well, when we're going back to Victoria Falls, not far from Victoria Falls town itself, which is in Zimbabwe, right in the town, sorry, there's Victoria Falls station, railway station. And some of you may have heard of Rovos Rail, and Rovos Rail is a journey that goes from Cape Town to Pretoria near Johannesburg so many times a month, and also so many times a month goes from Pretoria up to Victoria Falls itself. And that station the train pulls right into the middle of town. Rovos Rail is a bit like Orient Express, if you can imagine it that way. And so we do a lot on the Rovos Rail. And there's another train journey called the Blue Train, which again, some of you will have heard of. There's been a couple of TV programmes the past few months. And that goes again from Pretoria down to Cape Town. So if luxury train journeys, Orient Express train journeys are your thing, there's some good choices that we can help you out with. Namibia, again, we touched on a little bit on it earlier on that first photo. What Namibia really is scenery, landscapes, dramatic. It has a great wildlife. Up in the very north, we have the Etosha National Park, and there's excellent wildlife there. But the rest of Namibia is not renowned for all its wildlife because it's semi-desert, as you can see. But it's got these beautiful sand dunes, which are in Sossusvlei and the Namib Desert here. And you can, if you see fit, walk up those. A little bit difficult sometimes because with the sand it tends to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but it is worth the scenery, and watching sunset and sunrise on these dunes is amazing. There's a lot of private camps and sort of isolated camps in private reserves in Namibia. There isn't a huge amount of accommodation, and if that is on the agenda, it's very much worth booking ahead in many months ahead, because the availability can be quite tight. And there aren't many people at all. The country is huge compared to the UK, and it's got a population of about 2.5 million. So that's massively bigger than the UK, with such a small amount of people. And currently, it's on the travel corridor, so you can visit, as I said earlier. And I think at the bottom here we put Starry Night Skies. I took a trip out to Africa with some travel agents about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, And we had one night where we were stargazing, and to be honest with you, most people weren't that interested at the beginning. By the end, they were fascinated by the stories that the guides were telling them about the stars, what was up there, and also the clarity of the sky and what you could see. You know, on a clear night here in the UK, on a frosty, cool evening in the UK, even in the dark, you do very well. You go to somewhere like Africa in the middle of the desert or the middle of the bush, it will blow you away. Absolutely stunning. Okay, I'm going to jump up to Africa. The ubiquitous wildebeest, famous for its safaris, famous for the Great Migration. The Great Migration it varies really. It isn't constantly happening, and there's not constantly millions of wildebeest and zebra running around. It varies at different times of year in different parts of the whole region. At the moment, the migration in the main has come back into Tanzania, and very soon they'll be having their calves in December, January time. And then as the rains move and the rains change, the animals bit by bit begin to flow and ebb and start moving around south and west, and then north into Kenya. They go into Kenya usually into the Masai Mara July time and come back around September, October time. It varies year to year. This isn't Disney, you know, they don't just release them and press a button and away they go. They please themselves. But many people of the migration have this amazing image of wanting to watch, you know, 10,000 wildebeest cross a river, where there might be, or there will be, never mind, might be, there will be crocodiles. And there are places where that happens frequently, but it's not guaranteed on any one day. The migration can vary from year to year and from day to day and week to week. But we work with a lot of our excellent providers down in Kenya and Tanzania, and we work and try and make that happen for everybody as well. So no guarantees again. But aside of that, if you go to Tanzania and Kenya anytime, you will see amazing wildlife, absolutely stunning wildlife, because the Serengeti and the Ngorongoro and the Masai Mara are like nowhere else. But there are other areas as well. There are areas in southern Tanzania, there are areas in northern Kenya, which are less visited, again, more for the second, maybe third time traveller, but no less popular and no less worth seeing because of that. And Kenya, it's got a very strong tradition with the British, going back to colonial times. A lot of family have maybe older relatives that grew up there or lived out there. And this guy here, this is not one of the Maasai, this is one of the Samburu, who dress differently, but they're sort of affiliated with the Maasai warriors. And they dress differently, as you say, and they do love wearing their cloth, their national clothing, when their traditional dress when they're out taking game drives. And that scenery again of open plains and mountains in the distance, with who knows what down on the plains before you, is one of those magical images where again, sat there having a gin and tonic, watching the sun go down. You will be in heaven. Okay, I just want to touch on Rwanda. You know, Rwanda has a history, has a past. I think, you know, most of us know what that was, but it is one of the most amazingly safe, beautiful and well-organized countries in the world. They've really turned it round. All the horrible history of the past has gone. It's recognized, they have museums towards it, but the actual infrastructure there is out of this world. And all of the bigger hotel and lodge chains, such as Singita, such as One and Only, they've sympathetically built properties in the Rwanda region, in the forest and up near the gorillas, to give people that amazing experience. Hand on heart, going to see the gorillas is not an inexpensive option. The permits themselves are expensive, the accommodation is expensive, but the experience you will have with an hour with a gorilla family will be worth every penny and last a lifetime. So again, if Rwanda is on your list, it isn't just the gorillas. They have stunning wildlife parks, and I say it's a beautiful, beautiful country right on the equator, so it's very green and stunning. So again, if that is something that is appealing to you, then please talk to Mark and all his team. And chill. I mentioned at the very beginning, you know, the Indian Ocean links very well with Africa. And yeah, I suppose the traditional way is to think, well, look, let's go and have a safari and let's go on the beach. Let's go to the Seychelles or Mauritius. It's unfortunate for South Africa in some ways, because South Africa has some stunning, wonderful beaches. But what it doesn't have is that resort type infrastructure and even water temperature that they get genuinely in the Indian Ocean the same way. So most of the people who visit South Africa on a safari will go out to the Indian Ocean. If you go into East Africa, to Kenya and Tanzania, there are places like Zanzibar, the Kenyan coast, But then also Mozambique is coming into its own now. This is very much typical of what you might see in Mozambique. This is the Seychelles actually, but Mozambique has a similar coastline, blue seas, white ocean beaches, and there are some stunning beach resorts there. But we often say to people, look, yeah, that's the traditional idea of a safari and a beach paradise. But another way to maybe look at this is also to think about not being at the beach. And taking the idea of chill, to stay within Africa. So this here, for example, which is a beautifully run bath with champagne on a private decking overlooking the Zambezi River, which is in Royal Chundu, which is west of Victoria Falls, about 25 miles, 40 kilometres from Victoria Falls. Being out for the day and just coming back and chilling out here and having your own private sun terrace, or going to a spa in the middle of the mountains in the KwaZulu-Natal region, or going to a yoga retreat, at a wellness retreat somewhere. These sort of areas can also be combined with safaris. So the word chill has a very wide connotation as far as we're concerned. Hand on heart, most people it is the beach, get that, but there are other ways to maybe think in it. And if we can stimulate you to understand and look and think a bit differently, then hopefully we've done something with this presentation today. And then finally, that's us. I think it's important, given obviously what's been happening this past 7 or 8 months with COVID. Everything we do is fully protected by ATOL, fully ABTA members, and we're also a member of ATO as well. So all these recognised organisations as a reputable tour operator, then that we absolutely have and then take on board. So. But look, thank you. I know if there are any questions, I know Mark will obviously be fielding them, but I'm just going to close the presentation down and come back onto the camera so I can see Mark again. So, but thank you for your attention. I hope it's been worthwhile and interesting. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you so much, David. That was amazing. Such a great presentation. I could listen about Africa all day, and I think there's so much to cover. It's very difficult to cover that within 45 minutes as well. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A box now. I've actually got a question for David, which I'm going to put out there. I'm sure a few of you are thinking it already. David, what's Knighton Reeve's policy regarding COVID and amendments and changes and that sort of stuff at the moment? I know from an existing booking point of view, you guys have been excellent, but obviously just for future bookings, what's the policy at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good question, actually. Look, officially, we have our terms and conditions, which people sign when they book a holiday, and they are pretty standard for every tour operator. However, in the current climate, they have been sort of diluted left, right and centre, and deliberately so. I think the first thing to think about is that because of our relationship with all of our partners and the partners we choose to work with in Africa, again, we're very selective on who we choose to work with. We work very closely with them in the event of any eventuality of people having to cancel for any reason. We have genuine cancellations where people, before COVID, it wasn't COVID, it was because, I don't know, there was a medical issue or something. So we always try and work with them to minimise any potential financial cost to the client. That's the first thing. That is continuing through COVID. And what we've decided to do now with COVID is, look, yes, we need a deposit to confirm the accommodation and we need a deposit to confirm the flights. We are working with our partners to say, look, in the event of genuine reasons such as COVID, what is your policy regarding the return of this money? And most of them have said, yeah, it's fine. We will return the money to you, or you can amend it to a new date free of charge. So we are working with those properties so that when your clients book through you, through us, knowing that in the event of COVID becoming an issue where they do have to cancel in the future, then there will be as much flexibility and return of money as possible. But remember, under the Foreign Office advice, if they say you can't go, then we legally have to refund that anyway. And also under, I don't want to get technical here, but under the package travel regulations, which is a legal requirement that all tour operators have to abide to, we have responsibilities to you and the clients have rights that they can claim on. So yeah, we do things well, we do things very flexibly as best we can. We want happy clients, whether they travel or whether they sadly have to cancel. And if we can end up with that result, then it works for us and it works for you and it works for the clients as well. So.
Perfect. So I mean, I think it's just really reassuring to know that, and I think people can then also book with confidence as well. Just from a more of a product and destination one, obviously I went to Africa with you guys last year. I did Cape Town, the Winelands, and we did a Kruger for 4 nights. If I was coming to you guys for my second trip to Africa, what would you suggest? What would be like for a second timer to Africa that's done Cape Town, done the Kruger already?
Yeah, good question. It would depend what your priorities were. So let's take it on 2 sides. If you were wanted to be a wildlife buff, I think Botswana would be an amazing destination, and doing a combination of 3 different areas of Botswana and having 2 or 3 nights in each. So that would then give you a real wildlife hit. But what it would do, it'd give you it in 3 different areas, whereby you'd get a contrast of habitat, a contrast of wildlife, and a contrast of the facilities that they offer, and then probably combine that with somewhere like Victoria Falls, and that becomes a classic sort of 12-14 day trip. Also on the wildlife hit, going up to Kenya and Tanzania is very different to the Kruger. It's not like, well, I've seen a pride of lions, now that's it. I've been on safari once, now that's it. So from wildlife hit, Botswana or Tanzania or Kenya absolutely will fit the bill. If you wanted something a little bit less wildlife driven but more amazing, then Namibia has a wonderful pull as far as that scenery, atmosphere, people, feeling of openness, and history, and going back, tens of thousands of years. So any of those 2 I would probably recommend, but also depending on your interest, even what you did, which is Cape Town and the Kruger. I love, for example, one of my personal favourites, going back to KwaZulu-Natal, is that Battlefields region and the mountains and all around there. Yeah. And it isn't for dusty old men at all. It's just a fascinating way that they show what happened at that time between the Zulus and the Brits, and combining that also with one of the amazing game reserves and stunning scenery in the Drakensberg Mountains, easily within South Africa. So, talk to me about your 10th trip, Mark, and I'll still be giving you somewhere new, because that's the whole point about it. You can move on and on. But certainly as a second trip, Botswana, East Africa, Botswana, Vic Falls, East Africa or Namibia would probably have a real pull. Yeah. All sounds amazing. As long as I get to see a pangolin at some point, I'll be happy. Well, I've never seen a pangolin, and I've done dozens and dozens of safaris, and I think Catherine may have, actually. I know she's on the call. I think Catherine may well have, but that's on my tick list. It is on my tick list. Yeah. Amazing, brilliant. And I think another thing to mention with you guys, David, as well, is obviously you are the experts at the end of the day. So when clients do come to speak to us, I think it's always good to know as a customer, what we'll do is we can have a 3-way Zoom call, we can have a conference call, and whatever works for the client, I suppose, to make sure they get the right information, which I've always found very useful. Yeah, Catherine's excellent at that, and obviously Catherine, we also have some colleagues who work with Catherine as well, Ian particularly, but yeah, they're very good at liaising with you, and sometimes it's those little intricate little questions that need answering, and it's the little things that make a difference. So yeah, absolutely more than happy to get involved with you and the clients as needed. Yeah, certainly, not a problem. Brilliant. I've got one question that's just come in. David or Catherine, have you ever done the Devil's Pool at Victoria Falls? I haven't. I have been alongside Devil's Pool, and the water was too high, so it was closed. And for those that don't know, Devil's Pool is an area just at the top of the falls that you can actually go in literally up to your chest and almost lean on the top of the falls and look over as the water's going down. It's not for everybody, I'll grant it, but when it does open, which is in the low water season, which roughly is usually about August, I believe it opens, a number of people like to do it. So no, I haven't. I'm not sure if Catherine is giving me a nod. I think she sent me a WhatsApp and she's put, "Are you mad?" There you go. I think we'll take that as a no from Catherine. No, I do know people who've done it. So yeah, amazing. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, David, and thank you. I know that you've done a lot of work in the background as well. We are going to do a little bit of a prize draw, so I'm just going to change back to my screen. We've got all our attendees in today, and we're going to draw out a winner who's going to win £200 worth of vouchers towards their next trip with Knighton Reeve, and it is Dottie Lewis. So well done, Dottie. Congratulations. You've got £200 towards your next trip with Knighton Reeve. Again, I just want to say a final thank you to Catherine and David, and obviously if you do have any questions, please do feel free to drop them on email or give me a call, and we can speak to the guys at Knighton Reeve for you as well. Eventually when we get face to face, we'll try and do some face-to-face events with you guys in the store as well. I know we were just about to do it pre-COVID in March, but unfortunately it got cancelled, so we'd love to have you down whenever we get back to some kind of normality next year. Happy to. Yep. Happy to. Lovely. And next week we are going to be covering Asia. So we're going to be covering Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos with our partners at Inside Asia. So if you're interested in any of those destinations, please do sign up for next week.
It's been a great webinar today. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you guys, and we'll see you all very soon. Thanks,
Mark. Bye, everybody. Thank you.